session to order. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Here. That's you, Mr. Wilder.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
That's
got
you.
Here.
Yes, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Did we cover all the options?
Yes, I'm here too. All right,
Is he
perfect.
gonna tell you how to vote too?
All right, item 2.01, we've got closed session in accordance with Code of Virginia 2.2-3711A. Mr. Linden, would you care to read us into closed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Roanoke County School Board convene in closed session for the following: to discuss ongoing personnel matters under investigation pursuant to the personnel exemption at 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, and for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. All right, we'll move into closed session. Appreciate everybody's patience there as we take care of some business and closed. So what we'll do is we'll move on, jump right into item
We
2.
better come out of closed.
We're going to jump into item 2.02, certification of closed session, if you'd let me
I'm sorry.
get ahead of me
I
there,
apologize.
Mr. Linden. So with that being said, would you like to read us out of closed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Roanoke County School Board come out of closed session for the following: to discuss ongoing personnel matters under investigation pursuant to the personnel exemption at 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, and for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation, and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia. And I also move to certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the school board.
Perfect.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 2.03, action from closed session. We had no action from closed session. So we'll move right on to item 3, consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to adopt consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Nicely?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with that action and approving our personnel changes, I'd like to officially make an announcement and thank the school board for approving change in title for Dr. Rhonda Stegall, who will now be named our Assistant Superintendent for Administration. Dr. Stegall has done a very thorough and complete job all during this past year of pandemic of really learning all the safety procedures and explaining that, multiple sessions with the board and the public, and has just done a really good job with that. And so I'm pleased to have made that recommendation and appreciate the board's support. So I just want to congratulate Dr. Stegall.
So, well deserved. Appreciate appreciate everybody's hard work, but I mean, I'm sure 18 months ago you would never considered yourself to be a COVID or infectious disease expert. So you've done a hell of a job. So appreciate all you do. All righty. Let's move on to item 4.01. We've got an action item, request to declare instructional resources as surplus for sale or disposal. Mr. Weeks? Yes, sir. Hey, welcome. Wherever Chuck tells you to.
Sit right there.
All right, well, good afternoon. I'm here again to make request to declare instructional materials as surplus. We have adopted science, and we're in the process of purchasing and replacing the textbooks on the list. So it's pretty cut and dried again. Just wanted to go ahead and bring it before you and let's see if you have any questions.
Pretty standard procedure. Any questions for Mr. Weeks? Okay. Do I have a
Make
motion?
approval of item 4.01.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Thank you
Mr.
all.
Weeks. Appreciate you. All right. It looks like it's Mr. Lowe's day today, so we'll jump right into information items. We'll start out with item 5.01, William Byrd High School renovation update.
Good evening.
Hey, Mr. Lowe.
Hello. So Chuck's going to bring up a draw. Yeah, go ahead and bring up the drawing first. Well, that's fine. There you go. So as you can see what's going on at William Byrd, we have our trailer, or I'm sorry, cottages set up. Learning cottages are set up. If you notice, these are the exact same cottages that were sitting at Cave Spring 2 years ago. Believe it or not, they were sitting on the lot at the company's headquarters there in North Carolina, and we're not used between the Cave Spring job and the William Byrd job, and Avis actually hired the same company we hired. And since Avis is installing the trailers and responsible for them, they can deal with this company this time. So,
Were they less expensive this time around since they were 2 years older?
well, I don't know. I don't know the dollar value that Avis is paying for these, but I will say it was a whole lot better of an install for them on that asphalt than it was that football field at Cave Spring High School. So as you could tell, what's going on, this is the amount we're having so that we can begin phase one. Decking is not on yet, but what they're doing is they're starting the skirting in front of the doors. Actually started yesterday. And so as the skirting gets on around those this week, the decks will follow. And the decks will take about 3 to 4 days to install. They're all self-leveling, steel, aluminum. And so that will take no time at all. Right now, our guys, you can see that possibly the services, just to give you a quick update. So these are the electrical services we installed for the cottages. And so our guys are out there working, our 2 electricians that we have on staff right now, we have a couple who are out for FMLA leave. So they're out there working their tails off getting that done. AEP, we're meeting tomorrow, and what they were supposed to do is set a new pole back here for us. There's a transformer. They're going to run the electric out of that transformer up the pole, swing it back here, set another pole, and then they'll feed our services. And meanwhile, our guys are feeding the trailers, the cottages, and we should be up and running with no problem by August 4th on that setup.
Mr. Lowe, given that this campus and what we're doing, versus a complete shutdown at Cave Spring, and we're still utilizing parts of this building, from a security standpoint, I know we had fencing and everything at Cave Spring,
Yep.
And the proximity to the building is pretty close, but what are we doing from a security standpoint while those students are in those cottages?
Sure. So the week before school will be the restroom facility that will be the same one that was at Cave Spring, but fortunately here we have a sewer line right there, so that will be dumping right into the sewer system, so we're not going to have that problem of smell that we had at Cave Spring for that entire project. Fencing contractor comes tomorrow, and basically we're going to have fencing from the corner of the building out and all the way around this entire complex and ties back up to the school. It will not affect trash service. We'll have a double gate here for trash service and kitchen deliveries, and everything will be able to come through here. The fire department has already ran their fire truck through here to make sure that they meet the access requirements, which they do. And so we'll have multiple pedestrian gates, which will have panic bars and locks on them as well. So the entire cottage facility will be secure during the day for students.
Great.
Teachers.
Chris, can you give us some layout there? I know that white spot in the middle of the building is the cafeteria.
Sure.
And it has access from both the building that we're going to be using plus the trailers. What would be to the left of that?
Chuck, can you bring up the aerial, and we'll do the 360 aerial there? So you're right, this is the cafeteria right here. This is the large parking lot. And then out here is Washington. Middle school's back here. Football stadium's over this area. So this is a drone flyover from today. Cafeteria, that's going to be our major access into the school from this park, and as will that walkway right there into the school there. And then those doors will also be included as part of this complex.
So in phase one,
So phase one,
what part of the building will the students not have access to?
okay, the phase one is going to be up here on the far corner near the tennis courts, and as it rotates around, I'll show you. And I also have the phasing plan map I was going to show you. Did you not get the phasing plan map? Okay, well, I can just explain it through this aerial. So phase one is going to be the newest wing that was built back in the late 80s, early 90s, I think, up where the auxiliary gym is.
Later
96, is that? Okay, my dates, I'm awful. I was born in what year? Yeah. So that will be the first phase. The first phase is going to take care of that entire section, first and second floor. And as we move out of that phase, we'll rotate students in and out, kind of like a shell game, like we did at Glenbard. And we're going to be moving down across the front of the facility to where the guidance is now, and start working on that and incorporate the front lobby as well. But we're also gonna work in this area right here during the first phase, which is an infill area for the wrestling room. And there's also gonna be some infill area here and here for, weight room. So they're gonna be working on the infills because those will not affect the student populations. So, like I said, first phase right in here, second phase through this and some of this back in here, and then the last major phase will be all of this, which is major construction going on right here. And this was initially going to be the first phase, but as you remember me telling you at the last meeting, we're looking at 14 months lead time on the steel, and that's where all the steel has to go. And so we're not looking at getting steel until next spring. So that work we're looking at next summer.
Got a question.
Yes, sir.
Where are you putting the bathroom facilities outside?
Sure.
And
Well,
Okay,
this
go
would be the mobile facilities here.
where are you closing off that ingress egress?
No, it'll be sitting in this green patch right here. The walkway will
Oh,
still, will
just
still,
that
still be
area,
there.
okay.
So it's gonna be in that lawn area.
So the fire and rescue can still get in.
They'll still have that access
And
road
that'll
out
be where
front.
the gate is?
Yes, the gate will be right there.
Okay.
It's inside the gate. Everything will be inside the gate. And then we're also building, one of the things they're planning to start in the next week or two is the new restrooms on the backside of this building that ties into the cafeteria. So then you'll have permanent restrooms there, plus the temporary here, plus they still have access into the school to the front restrooms and the locker rooms and team rooms. They all provide restrooms as well.
Are the 12 cottages all we're gonna need for the entire project?
For the phasing, that's all we need right now, but we do have space if they decide they want to take more classrooms than what they're going to take, but that provides us 24 classrooms. And none of the phasing right now takes more than 24 classrooms.
Chris,
Yes, sir.
a couple of questions. And I'm not asked Tammy this, but those yellow containers there, they are storage for, I don't know if it's sports, I don't know what it is, but when we finish this deal, can they get rid of those?
Oh, we will. They're strictly for construction now.
Oh, that is for construction? 'Cause
We had extras for, every school received at least one for the COVID because we were taking furniture out. And we own them. We didn't rent them because it was cheaper
That's
for us
right,
to
I
own
remember
them.
that, yeah.
So we're using them for construction since we owe them. We don't have to rent them now.
Okay.
And so we've moved a couple on site and they'll be moving as this process
I thought we
begins.
had one or two out there before, so that's why I was.
Yeah,
Okay.
just at the beginning of COVID last year, we purchased them.
Gotcha. And then the second thing, I haven't been here last week and haven't got a chance to go up there. So we started demo at all?
They're starting in the faces rooms, which is the rooms up on the very front corner, where you have one on the left, one on the right of the corner building. They're gonna start there at the end of this week, early next week.
Okay.
We didn't let them start demo until we were sure our ground trailer's operational. That's part of the contract. If we were afraid that if the trailers were not operational and we started tearing down inside the school this summer, what would happen? Where were we gonna put kids? So we had to ensure that we were gonna be in those colleges before August 4th.
Gotcha.
You did put in the contract with the cottages that we'd be able to buy for those half price?
No, I don't have that built in any contract.
Did you say 24?
Who is he, Mr. Haney?
24 and a half price? Well, I'll sell it for 4 or whatever
We could definitely explore that option later on.
Okay.
But we know what they tried to charge us last year when we
Oh,
talked about
yes.
it.
We'll have to put you on the pickers or something.
So like I said, just as an update, you're gonna start, they'll be working themselves inside the building, at the end of this week, early next week, working on the restrooms in the cafeteria area and in the front of the building for the faces rooms.
Is the time frame for this 18 or 24 months?
It's at least 24 months right now. It was initially 18 months, Mr. Weimer, but with the lead times on the materials, it has been bumped to the summer of 23. So any questions about the Byrd project? We have some new vests in our operations department and some new hard hats. So anytime if you're wanting to visit the site, see the construction, let us know, and we'll get you the necessary stuff.
Good point. I do want a William Byrd hard hat. We had Cave Spring hard hats. I want a William Byrd hard hat.
Avis will provide those to you, I'm sure.
Right. I feel like they should be maroon.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, even better. I like that. I like
Maroon ones?
Yes.
We'll see what we can do.
Yes.
At least one special one, right?
One thing
There's gotta be a
about
couple blue ones too, I thought, by the way.
design build, whatever happens, they have to take care of, right?
Yes, sir.
From where we
Our
are.
price is locked. Now, the only time that the price would change is if we went in and said, hey, we want to do something completely different than what we signed the contract for. Any mistakes or omissions that they have in this project from this point forward, it is on Avis and Hughes. So, speaking of design build, just a kind of an idea of something I thought about earlier today. Think about, does anybody know where we were at this time last year when it came to Byrd? Just off the top of your head.
Where we were at.
Where were we at in the process?
We hadn't even started.
We hadn't even interviewed the 4 teams for the project at this point last year. We didn't sign a contract.
That's
until the
right,
end of
because we
September,
bumped it
October
back to like
last
May
year.
or no.
So we're starting, we have
Ended up in
trailers up,
August.
construction starting less than 9 months after
Nice.
signing the contract. I just thought that's an interesting fact of this whole design build.
It is.
Awesome.
Give that to Greenway.
Yeah, no, it didn't.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that update. I'm excited. Excited to see the progress and excited.
Yeah,
for the
it is
community.
nice.
I know you
Thank
are
you.
too, so.
Thank you.
All right, let's shift gears over to Cave Spring community. We'll get a little update on the Cave Spring High School open house.
Sure. The open house will be July 31st. It's a Saturday in two Saturdays from now, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. At 11 a.m. they will be having a ceremony of opening the 2000 time capsule, and then installing a new time capsule at the same time for 10 years from now. So that is going on. There'll be a ribbon cutting ceremony, and the school will be open for everyone to walk through and look at the fabulous job that was done over there. Unfortunately, a year later we actually got in the facility, but it still looks brand new. So it'll be an exciting day for everybody to take a look at it.
And there will be people there to sort of guide you, they're not gonna do tours because that
Point you in
turns
the
out
right
to be.
direction, right?
Exactly, so.
Yep, we'll be there, and we'll be able to answer any questions you have, and be more than happy to explain what's what and where everything is. It'll be an exciting day.
What time is the actual ribbon cutting?
Is the ribbon,
Yeah.
Chuck?
Ribbon cutting, yeah, before it'll be at 10.
I think ribbon cutting's at 10, and then the time capsule is at 11.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on open house? Okay. So next on the agenda is the high school game fields maintenance discussion. And let me give, I've talked to some of you about this. I asked Chris to, and this is something we've discussed in the past, trying, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, leveling the playing fields for all our, high schools, starting with the high school. But this got started, full disclosure, is I'd gotten a call about the soccer field, the unplayable soccer field at Hidden Valley, and I'm sure we all get calls from parents, and until we get out there and look at it ourselves, but Mr. Lowe was kind enough to meet me out there along with the athletic director and principal, and we had a couple of reps from turf companies out there, not artificial turf companies. Yeah, I use the term turf, but I made no illusion there will not be artificial turf over there from a budget standpoint. But that just got us to thinking, the field is unplayable. The high schools and the booster clubs, they don't have the money to redo a field. And then that got us talking about maintenance and how some schools, are paying it out of their budget. And, we've got some, one or two being funded from our operating budget here at Central. So I just thought it'd be good for Chris to kind of give us a refresher of what we've got going on at essentially all of our athletic fields at the high school level. Who's paying for what, where's it coming from, and really what options we have.
So one of the things I want to do is put together a spreadsheet, which I've placed in all of your possession in front of you. And I wanted to give you kind of a rundown of what the situation is at each school for each of their game surfaces. I did not evaluate practice surfaces, just game surfaces. for instance, Glenver, Byrd, and Northside all have a shared facility that they're using for soccer and football games at their stadium fields, with Northside having the Bermuda and Byrd and Glenver having turf. So obviously the maintenance cost at Byrd and Glenver for their soccer and football game fields are pretty negligible, except for the money that gets put away every year for future replacement. Hidden Valley and Cave Spring have their own soccer game fields because they use those because they have a shared stadium for Bogle, which is turf, obviously. So one of the things I want to do is put together what the cost of maintaining those game fields were in a proper way to maintain them. We're not talking about just going out and cutting them once or twice or 3 times a week, depending on the surface. We want to get the actual cost of what it would be like for fertilization, verticutting if you have a Bermuda field, aerating, deep core aerating. So we have a great example of that at Northside High School, where we are outsourcing the maintenance of that field, and it's roughly $30,000 a year. And that $30,000 a year covers mowing 3 times a week for the year. It also covers verticutting once, aeration twice, top dressing with about 70 tons of sand. So all those services are included in that $30,000, and that's the proper way to maintain a Bermuda field, for instance. Now, to maintain a cool grass field, which is what we have at Hidden Valley High School soccer field, and I think and then all the baseball field and softball fields are all cool grass. Cave Spring has a Bermuda soccer field. So to maintain those fields the proper way, you don't have to do all the verticutting and all the multiple aerations through the year, but you still have to top dress it every once in a while. So once every 2 years, probably top dressing, but you do need to aerate it once a year. You don't have to mow it quite as often, but it takes a lot longer to recover. But the cost of maintaining one of those cool grass fields would be in that $18,000 to $20,000 range a year for a soccer size field. So I also received prices to do the baseball and softball fields, and then of course a track maintenance per year, because eventually those rubber tracks are also going to need to be replaced or resurfaced in 8 to 10 years of having them. And so we need to look at the cost for those as well. So what Mr. Moretz is talking about is we went out there and looked at Hidden Valley the high school soccer field, and it's very unplayable. When you got out there and walked on it, you had bare spots that would range from 12 inches to 8 inches wide, and you had those big clumps of crabgrass and things like that coming out. And the question is, well, why did it turn that way? Why did it become unplayable? And it's just, to be fair, it's because it wasn't taken care of properly. It may be getting mowed every week like it's supposed to, but it hasn't been aerated in over 4 or 5 years. It hasn't been top dressed ever. When you don't take care of the field that way, that's the kind of situation that ends up happening year after year, and it doesn't get better; it gets worse until you actually just come in and fix it.
And is that really the job? And we've had these discussions. Is that really the job of the AD and coaches?
Absolutely not.
You know, I mean, some coaches, even if it's not their job, we know some coaches are, they're making it their job but we can't put those expectations on every coach. I mean, especially if they're teaching or, so.
And when I say that they're not taking care of the field the proper way, that's not disparaging anyone that's out there. They're using the means they have or the knowledge they have. One of the things we have, we have turnover at a lot of these schools when it comes to ADs and staff like this, and the maintenance plans are not passed to the coaches or from AD to AD. So they may think it's just, hey, I just need to go out and mow once a week, or I need to mow twice a week. They don't think about the fertilization, the aeration, the verticutting, all that stuff.
So I know we did this a couple years ago when we did the field maintenance thing. But for instance, at Hidden Valley, does the AD, do they do that now? Are they the ones that are doing that, the AD and the coaches? Are they mowing those fields?
Yes, sir. There in Cave Spring, it's mostly ADs, coaches, boosters. It's a combination of those three.
So it's the same thing at ours for the practice.
Practice fields,
and
yes, sir.
Almost we just paid all that money and put in that Bermuda field, and it almost got overrun this year because we weren't paying attention to it and our people were doing it. So I agree. It's we've got to do a better job.
Yeah, and it looks like that they are doing a better job at Northside because, we're paying them, right?
Yes, we're paying an outside source
So
kind of company to
they
take
are
care of that
taking,
field.
and the equipment is furnished?
Well, they use their own equipment over at Northside. The not Northside people, the company that's
Mhm.
maintaining that
Yeah.
field uses their own equipment. They come in on trailers.
And that
3 times
field's
a
in
week.
good shape, right?
Mhm.
Okay, I haven't been over there to see it, but I mean, we're getting
It's-
our money's worth by paying someone to do it, right?
It's the best surface you could possibly play on.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's
if
what
you
I
walked
feel
out
here.
there on that barefoot wise, I mean, it's like a plush carpet. It's amazing.
It's beautiful.
So why wouldn't we do it for?
Mhm.
That's
The rest
the, main football soccer field.
Yes, sir.
And when we're talking about that, though, if we do this, we need to take a holistic approach again, because, and I'll say this, Northside's baseball field, unless something's changed, I haven't been over there, but that's awful. You know, I remember when my son played on it 15, 16 years ago, you know, I don't know if it's still this way, the outfield either went down or up, I can't remember, so it rises, and the infield was in rough shape too. So I think we might have that in a
That's
lot
your
of these schools.
cool grass, what they call cool grass,
Mhm.
which is where you gotta about maintaining it. And if you don't maintain it, it does get those clumps.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Well, that's,
The thing,
I'm sorry, go
the
ahead.
thing about cool grass is everybody has it. Most people have it at home and they think that they can do it, but people at home have services that do that too. You know, and the services are really what grows the grass, other than Mother Nature and you watering it. It's, when you're looking at the volume of activity on these fields, by ourselves, the rec department, you know, AAU and all the traveling teams and so forth, that kind of traffic year round, you know, unless it's professionally taken care of, it's likely to deteriorate quickly because just the wear.
Mhm.
And you have a wet season or a particularly dry season, and that simply compounds the problem. You either can't use it because it's too wet, or you use it and destroy it, or it's too dry, and you get out there and you beat it to death too. So,
We
you know,
found that
there's
out
there's
for-
there's certainly some advantages to having professionals involved in this
Yeah, I
because,
agree.
you know, like it or not, we don't have horticulturists on staff at these schools that, you know, would be able to say, you know, it needs the pH changed, it needs to have, you know, an overseeding with this particular type of grass, you know, to fill in spots and that type of thing. It's kind of like, in my mind, it's kind of like where we've gone to with the turf fields. They're expensive, and you've got to put money aside so that every 5 or 6, 10 years,
10, 12.
you're gonna replace it. But in the interim, you don't have, you know, cancellations, you don't have, you know, unnecessary injuries, you don't have all the other things that go along with fields that are not properly maintained. And again, I'm not using the word properly in a pejorative way here. I'm simply saying, you know, that either they don't have the skill background, or they don't have the equipment, or they don't have the money. I can be honest with you. I'm looking at the kind of monies that we're looking at here, and when I was athletic director, I would have died
Have that money.
several times over to have seen the kind of money, you know, that might be available and necessary, you know, to maintain these facilities.
So
When you look, excuse me, sorry, I mean, when you look at the cost that you have on here to properly maintain these fields every year, and then just Northside Baseball, for example, I think the baseball coach, what does he make? $2,700? But yet he's expected to maintain that field, which would cost $15,000 a year. When there, and I know the same thing is
Well, with,
at Cave Spring and over at Hidden Valley. I mean, your booster club at Vinton has done a fantastic job, but these coaches expected to do $15,000 worth of field maintenance work along with coaching a baseball team or a softball team or whatever that sport may be. It's never made any sense to me that we expect them to maintain these fields. They don't have the expertise and the knowledge to do it properly, and that's what, I mean, let's face it, the Glenver football field ended up in the condition it was just after years and years and years of not being properly maintained or aerated.
Mhm.
so also what I show here is the unfunded maintenance cost per field that we're not currently taking care of out of operations. Operations, we're taking care of the fertilization for every field once a month for 4 months, game field, and we're taking care of the north side. Now, that was funded by the school board. They increased our maintenance budget to do that, but we're spending about $44,400 out of maintenance to take care of the north side, and then to do the fertilization at all the fields, which is just a one-time per month thing for 4 months. So the 185 would be the cost of what if we put out a bid or an RFP, a proposal, to have someone else come in and take care of those fields, those additional fields, and that would include the mowing, the top dressing, the aeration, that type of stuff. So it can be tweaked, it could be added, stuff that can be added to it, taken away from it. And the reason I say that is because just in a few conversations I've had with the ADs, a lot of the baseball coaches, the softball coaches are not interested in anybody else coming in and mowing their fields, for instance. The aeration, things like that, they're all for, but because they play games multiple times a week, they don't want someone coming in mowing right if they chalk their field or something like that. So,
For instance, our
Right,
softball, you're not gonna be able to touch.
right, so there may be some
It's just
tweaking
the way it is.
in what you're wanting to do scope-wise if you were to go down this way. Also, there need to be some thought about, whether hidden by the soccer field, whether you want that to be a Bermuda field or a pool grass field, depending on, when's the Bermuda most growing the best and when's it in best use. Well, the best use was, as Mr. Greenway might be able to tell you, that the Bermuda out at Byrd this year did not pop until that first week of June because we had those cooler temperatures all the way into May. So the Bermuda never turned green until that first week of June. Well, if we have years like that, Bermuda's not going to come in on soccer season is going to be over. So that you're going to be playing on a rye field, which is overseeded at the top of the Bermuda, or a painted Bermuda field, which is another option according to the gentleman out there.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
that was kind of nuts. Or it's just going to be a brown Bermuda field. But so you got to think about what option you want to do for a soccer only field. Do you want to do Bermuda or just put the money into repairing the pool grass and then maintaining it?
Just to clarify for north side, the soccer and football, the $30,000 that we're paying, is that just the stadium field, or does that also include the
That's
practice?
just the stadium field, and that's all I included in any of this was just stadium fields.
Chris, could you explain, where it says unfunded, you said 185,000. If we were to, RFP the services that you see over here in the column, recommended services,
Yes, sir.
would that 185,000, do it, or would we need to add the 44? I understand where the 90's coming from. That's from, those turf fields.
Yes, sir.
I got that, and in fact, I don't see anything on there for Glenver for their turf field, but I would assume that you would need to include them because it will need to be replaced at some point in time.
That's got to go into the
And I know-
CIP, and we've not.
And I know that, I don't know, I know at one time that, the set aside each year was put in there specifically for replacement of those turf fields, so that every 7 or 8 years when you had to do it, the money was there, it didn't become a large ticket item, for the division to have to come up with. So, I think that, are we looking at 185 plus 44?
No,
The 90 to me, it needs to be more than that because Glimmer needs to be in it. But that's kind of a given. When you put that turf field down, you have to think about replacement. The maintenance won't hurt you as much as the replacement will.
And I think Chris has captured that in the far right-hand column under cost there, for Glenver High.
yeah,
He's estimating setting aside 40,000 annually for that, field, Mr. Weimer.
So that would come over there under maintenance replacement costs.
well, what I was intending to do with that 185,000 is that if you were wanting to have an RFP put out just to maintain all those fields and have someone mow them and aerate them, do all those things in a maintenance program that is required, that's what I would need to be able to do that. So that would basically be what I would ask for, an increase in operations budget next year for maintenance to cover all, so we could contract that out to workers to do.
And we have companies in mind that, because I know we have a contract right now, I believe that's
It
but-
expires after this year.
But I don't want to disparage any companies,
No.
but this is more of a residential type company that
It
we're
is.
using, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and the companies you have in mind, you know, this is kind of their specific focus and their expertise,
Yes, sir,
correct?
that's correct.
All right,
It takes expertise to top dress these fields.
absolutely.
And it takes a lot of expertise when you think about the blend of grass you're gonna put out there based on, you know, climate and, soil conditions and everything else. So this is not the guy down the street necessarily
No.
that, you know, has a mower and is gonna mow for you. So my question still is, in that, where it says OPS funding, maintenance cost, that 44,000, if you went with the unfunded maintenance cost column, 185, would you need the 44?
Yeah, that would need to stay in my budget, because that's what we are doing right now.
It's already there.
It's already.
That's
funded.
already in, that's
We're
already
paying
funded,
for
that is in
I'm
my
not talking
budget.
about this year's budget, I'm talking about out years.
Yes, it's in my budget every year now.
So this is in addition to the maintenance that you're doing
Yes.
in this 185, so you're really looking at 220.
Yeah, I would need 185 to be able to do
An
all of our
additional
game fields in the county.
Okay.
Another 185, yes, sir. Now, then again, that could be high, because it's like I said, if we take the mowing out of it, for the softball and baseball fields, and that would probably save you some money if the coaches and the ADs do not want someone coming in and mowing those fields. There's all kinds of ways we can massage the scope to be, unique to each school if we have to.
And I'm good with this. I think, you know, we need to do some of this. But I think as you're looking, I'm assuming the right side, you're saying capital funded. We're looking at spending this money out of capital.
Those are one-time costs.
Right. And so what I'd like to also throw in there is the north side baseball field needs to be done. That should be looked at as a part of it. If we're doing this, let's do it, you know, let's do it. Let's do every.
Has anybody approached you? I know I've heard talk, I haven't seen anything, about going to turf infields on all 5 baseball fields?
No, sir. No one's ever asked me anything about that.
Because I
If
know
we
that
did
the
it for
coaches.
baseball, we'd have to do it for softball.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And to be honest, I haven't heard, I haven't heard
no,
anyone
I'm
come
telling
to
you
our
up there.
department about a
Tell
maintenance
them I'm
need
telling
at any of the baseball or softball fields either.
Well,
No
you've
school
heard
has
about
come to us
one.
about that.
You've heard about one.
But I did, that was a recent one about that, yeah, to the
I see.
water out there, and we actually did look at that, to see what we're gonna have to do.
Where the field's about,
Yes, it's starting
yeah.
to sink
yeah,
out there and create a bowl, yes,
Yeah.
we did see that.
yep.
Could you get a better, you know, talk to the ADs, get a better feel of what this actual cost would be, and then come back maybe to us with, you know, the.
Refined the
Well,
numbers.
Yeah.
knowing which, you know, if the Byrd, for instance, if Byrd softball doesn't want us touching, they want to continue the mowing.
Right.
I mean, those are, I mean, you know, like you said, some
Update the
coaches.
numbers.
I'd also love to know, I mean, you know, just, you know, if we're talking Northside's baseball field, I mean, is that something that the turf company, I mean, can they handle everything to get that to a better playing
I would
field?
need someone to look at that, because I
Right.
haven't even,
You know, same thing,
and get us-
you know, but I'm assuming, you know, just looking at the soccer field at Hidden Valley, the turf company can take, I mean, that's
Right.
a little different.
Now, for
beast.
instance, on that one, to get that one playable, I've got a price of $20,000 to get it playable in the cool grass environment that it is now.
Gotcha.
And then I also got a price for $40,000, and this is the you know, and just throw money at it to fix it, and then come up with a maintenance plan after that. $40,000 would turn it to Bermuda and make it playable by next spring.
But
So-
once again, I'm not the expert there, but I mean,
Yeah.
if soccer, I mean, how often are we really playing soccer into the month of June on a regular basis?
Right. It's a unique year.
Exactly. So is that, you know, but I'd also like to know, you know, I think that was a good recommendation. Maybe, you know, you've got a month until our next work session. That gives you time to talk with the ADs, that the ADs can talk with the coaches, you know, but I also want to make sure that, you know, we're as equitable as we can, you know, with facilities at schools, right? I mean, going forward. Because you know, I mean, some schools don't have the booster clubs that other schools do, and, you know, and I know it all comes in waves, you know, but, you know, are all of our track facilities have the same, you know, have this,
It's a good point. It's
you know,
an excellent
because
point.
I mean, I don't know about the other, but, you know, Rhonda can probably attest to this. I know Hidden Valley High School, you know, we're the only high school track that can't do pole vaulting. So we've got to go over, you know, for that one event, we've got to bus everybody over to Cave Spring. We have room for it, you know, and I also know our, you know, at Hidden Valley, our long jump and triple jump runway is significantly shorter than at other high schools. So, I mean, I just want to remedy some of these things and make sure that, you know, we're on equal footing, you know? I mean, and that's also gonna get us down the, I mean, I know we may not be able to do it in the next couple of months, but, you know, I'm hoping we can continue the, tennis court discussion. I mean,
Well, no, my understanding is we're doing the other tennis courts.
Yes, we start in August.
okay,
Yeah.
problem solved.
Yeah.
Did I
So-
worry you there, brother?
Yeah.
All right, good.
Except
It had already
Northside, we're
started.
not doing that one.
Oh, yeah, we're not doing
Yeah.
that. Okay, good. All right, good.
We're hitting the other 4 tennis courts starting in August.
That's.
Everything should be
three,
done by the
Chevy.
spring on the,
Yes.
if all goes well.
Just one observation. I understand exactly where Tim's coming from. You know, there are certain coaches that feel like, you know, that field is their responsibility, you know, to make sure that it's game playable and that type of thing. But I can tell you from experience that that can also be a detriment, because if you don't do it properly, then the field doesn't continue to grow. It doesn't continue to do the things that you want it to do. Then you always get into that finger pointing thing. Well, we did this, and this. You mowed. Maybe the mowing, you know, wasn't at the right height, wasn't done frequently enough, was done under adverse conditions. And then it, you know, becomes, well, who's going to repair that? Or who's going to make it right? So I understand what you're saying, and I'm sure that in contracts you can work that language out. But I'm just saying that it's not as cut and dry as we'll take care of this, because that might be a critical part. Well, it is. Mowing is a critical part of the field maintenance, along with the other.
To your point, Mr. Weimer, on the baseball at Byrd, I think that's gonna take care of itself. You'll appreciate this, that you were there. Doug Pence he's stepping down, so he's been there 40 years, and he's done that's every stitch of, so, you know, the baseball field will probably come into play now. You know, softball's still not, but, you know, that may as well. But, and Mr. Weimer's got a good point. If we use our folks, then we get it consistent and we know it's done properly and it's done. Not our folks, but whoever's doing it, is what I
I
meant.
think if we can get further information, you can get back further information, we can.
Sure, I
Okay.
can get a scope determined from each school what they want, but with some of the things that also comes into play with that is turnover of staff, and then
Right.
then all of a sudden the scope changes in the middle of,
Right.
of the funding year too.
No, I agree. Mr.
So we gotta be
Weimer's
careful
point,
about that.
I agree. I mean, I hate that, you know, we do have some that are territorial, because I think, like you said, when people change or things change, it sometimes.
And I put it on here because I thought it was important, because some of these tracks are starting to age. Hidden Valleys, for instance, is probably over 10 years old now, 12 years old. So they're probably going to be looking for a rubber replacement on that. And then Cave Spring, you know, their Project 50 track is probably 8 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Is that about right, Dan? So you're probably 2 or 3 years from that needing to be resurfaced. Well, when you resurface one of these rubber tracks, the base is usually really good, but you're still talking $70,000 to $80,000 to come in and do a re-rubberization of a track.
So these tracks, we only get 8 or 10 years out of?
Yes, those rubbers
Wow.
are about
Rubberized
8 to
tracks.
12 on average. They're
Wow.
about the same as field turfs, supposedly.
I'm gonna have to stop running on them, I guess.
It'll be down to 6
I
years.
see that.
You been coming over to Cave Spring and running?
Yeah, I've been wearing yours out.
Chris, do you recall, I know that Doug Blunt and his staff had put together a cost on it, and it seemed like it was considerably more than this if Parks and Rec were gonna maintain these fields for us. I thought that was closer to $400,000 or $500,000.
It was $360,000 if I'm not mistaken. I looked it up the other day, but that was for them to maintain our game fields for us. And that was when we started the contract with them, I think 4 years ago, to mow all of our properties outside of our game fields. And that part of the project, or the scope of work, was declined. And so they just do around all of our facilities now. They do not do our game fields. We still maintain those. But they may be interested in another one coming up.
I think
but-
they're having troubles finding employees.
They
and-
are.
and
They are. They're
doing some
struggling.
things that- I'm just curious as to how we think we can do it for so much less than they were gonna be able to do it
And
for.
these are numbers that came from vendors, so it's just,
One of them was with us that day,
Yes.
and he seemed extremely knowledgeable.
he did.
So,
Mike's point, well taken.
any other questions? All right, so we'll plan a follow-up discussion at our next work session after that'll give you some time to chat with, does that give you enough time to
Sure.
chat with ADs and everything, Chris? Is that-
Yeah, it
can
shouldn't be an issue.
Okay,
We can
alright.
have these discussions and get it taken care of.
Perfect. So, and if, in the next week or so, well, let's say in the next week, if there's anything specific at high schools y'all are thinking, about, aside from, artificial turf on a football field or something. Let Mr. Love know. So, all right, we'll keep it with you, Chris. Ventilation mitigation discussion.
So, a question came up just exactly what we were doing in our buildings since the pandemic started. And what we were doing is we're following ASHRAE standards. We were letting in 10% of outside air was what we were doing pre-pandemic. And that is what our units were designed for, is 10% exchange of outside air with inside air. And what we did, what Mr. Kita did when this pandemic started, is we increased our outside air from 10% to 20%. And we also increased our runtime 30%. So basically it's running into the evenings, 9, 10 o'clock, instead of shutting down around 5 or 6 whenever the buildings were exited. So the occupancy, even though we're not occupying the building in the evening, we're still running our units those extra hours every day, just to keep the exchange of outside air, things like that. So everything we're doing is, what we're doing right now is we're maximizing what our units will allow in our buildings, but we're still above and beyond what the ASHRAE standards are at 10%. Now there are some repercussions on some of this with our equipment. Number one, adding that runtime on our equipment, they're running a third to 30% longer than what they did in the past. So we're having a little bit more maintenance work having to be done on them. Some replacement work we've had to do also. Also, when we're letting in that much outside air during the day, we've doubled the amount of outside air. Your units are running harder to keep up with the humidity and things like that from the outside air. So you're getting a little bit more wear and tear on your units just by letting in more outside air, and we're running them longer. So I think that's just some of the things. Jeff seems to feel like we're at the breaking point right now, that if we were to increase it any more, then we're going to start seeing massive failures on a lot of our units, because they were not designed to do what they're doing right now. Basically what he's saying is we're pushing the limits. So I just wanted to share that information because I know it came up a couple weeks ago in an email, and I wanted to address it.
Mr. Wyman?
Just a quick question, Chris. One of the things that CDC recommends, they recommend 20. And I read a 46-page report on why they did that and the effects of raising it. And if all things are working properly, that puts you into the safe zone. They've got a 6-layer zone, and they say, if you get into 5 and 6, you're in good shape, especially if you're not going to be masked and that type of thing. I guess my question is, one of the things that also was involved in that, and you mentioned, increased runtime. Does that include like before school too? Does
Yes,
it start
sir.
earlier?
Yes, sir.
Because that's an important part of it, and then it runs afterwards, to clean out again. The other thing that they really worked on was the MERV equivalent of the filters.
Yes, sir.
And I know that if you change the MERV equivalent of your filters, you're going to have some, residual pressures, that, are going to impact your equipment as well. But I'm wondering, do you know what kind of MERV we're working now, and how often? I know that the report that I saw earlier, indicated that they're doing it twice a year, maybe quarterly, depending upon, if you have staff and so forth, which is great, because they need that. When you think about the amount of volume of air that's going through there and what we're trying to accomplish on the other side. But do you know
I do not know the brand or the quality of our filters. I can get that information from Mr. Meacham. I asked him to be here today, but he already had something planned.
All right.
So I can get that information for you though.
And one other question, we've worked together on a few constructions, and we've seen, when the people come in and they put those blue units up against the distributor or the source, checking for the amount of air that's coming in. We found quite a few places where baffles or even channels, where they was simply directed away from rooms, along the system. I know that in the elementary schools, and I saw several on the list that you showed us, that we're in some sort of need of attention. Do we know in those particular schools, if we were to need to have students in the building, in conditions, could we have, enough airflow into each individual room to be assured that we're meeting ventilation, recommendations?
Yeah, I don't know how. I would have to ask Jeff. I don't know if there's a way you can measure the cubic CMS, your cubic meter volume of the airflow. What Jeff did tell me, prepping me for this, was that the units designed are designed by the architects and engineers, and they're designed to meet those standards. And as we've increased the usage of them, and we've increased the outside air, that there is a more of an exchange. So we're exceeding what the standard is, what they were designed for.
Right.
But I can't tell you if there's a way to actually measure that.
Yeah.
That would be a good question I need to ask him.
Well, this report, went to great lengths to look at the contributing things, the percentage of outside air, and also, the volume flow, into the rooms, and whether it was circuit. I'm not an HVAC person, okay?
Me either.
I just read 46 pages and it baffled me. But those are the things that my takeaways, that getting the supply into the classroom and making sure, that you had circulation. Not only putting air in, but taking air out so that you got that flow. I think it recommended something like 5 or 6 turnovers of air on a daily basis.
That sounds right.
To really get the job done.
And something that we've added as part of this pandemic, if you remember, you used the first round of the ESSER money. We bought the air purifier ionizers with the HEPA filters for every classroom in the county, and those are turning the 1,000 square foot classrooms over 3 times an hour. So most of our classrooms are below 1,000 square feet. So we're probably getting more than that, 3.5 to 5 times an hour, just with those units themselves.
And that was another recommendation, that if you weren't meeting it based on, the MERV and the distribution, then you could certainly use those, to pump it up. It was interesting in the sense that when I looked at the list of schools, and I see it's on the board up there now, but when I look at the list of schools, elementary, middle, high school, elementary, and central office. Most of those are elementary.
Yes, sir.
And should we decide, to come back full strength, with few restrictions, then those schools right there would have the students who were least likely to have any kind of COVID resistance with regard to vaccinations and things like that. So, just a thought.
Sure.
As you're looking at those schools on that list right there, and you're getting ready, in the next 4 weeks, it might be worth taking a look at some of them and just randomly check to see if you're getting the kind of flow that you can.
We'll definitely look into that. I know we're commissioning everything we do now. So we have a team out of Pulaski area that comes up and they commission all of our new installs.
Great.
And so we're getting good feedback on that. And this is just the projects that we've done during this past school year. You should know that in the pipeline, we're doing a major system out at Northside High School right now. It's out to bid. The bids are due this week. We're also doing a big system at Northside Middle School. William Byrd Middle, we're in the middle, those not on this list. Those are ones we've actually done
Right.
this year. These are all upcoming in the coming months. William Byrd Middle is getting a massive HVAC renovation. We're actually out with the design team now to finish up the drawing so we can get it out to bid.
Well, it sounds like we're on the right track. I was not being critical. I was simply, you know,
Sounds like you're reading
we're,
a lot.
boards are right now not faced with easy decisions. And one of those, you know, is what school's gonna look like when we come back. And certainly ventilation is one of the major factors that can mitigate, you know, and allow us, you know, some latitude with regard to what it might look like. So I just share that for what it's worth.
Sure, and just add to this, just so you're aware where we're at. We're trying to replace filters 4 times a year, but we're not quite reaching that. We're more like 3 times, which is still more than
It's
what we
better
were
than
doing in the
2.
past. We've actually cross-trained warehouse personnel, so when things are slow for them, they go over to maintenance and they go out and they help change filters to get us caught up or to get ahead of the game. And we're hoping that soon some new hires will be into the maintenance department to help us out with some of that as well.
Right. Let me
Are
ask you
any of
this
the,
question.
okay, the manufacturer, exceeding these manufacturing standards that are in place, does that void any warranties, or do any of these HVAC systems have warranties with them?
Well, a lot of
Maybe
them
what's a
do,
case
especially the
brand?
new stuff, but we're not exceeding anything on the warranties. What we're doing is we're just asking them to work a little bit harder than what they were designed for. And Jeff is overly cautious because things are working pretty well right now, and that's a good thing though, because we don't want something to break down in the middle of the school year. But his biggest concern right now is the amount of outside air we're bringing in at 20%. He says those units are working really hard, especially this summer, because of the amount of humidity they're bringing in, and they seem to be running in the cool all day long. There's no breaks for the equipment. So that's his biggest concern right now. We're going to actually ease off of that now for a couple of weeks until we get close to getting back, because we don't have summer school going on at most of the facilities now. So we're able to kind of ease that off a little bit and let those units break, and we can give some preventive maintenance on these units, which we've been neglecting for the past couple of months just because they're running all the time. So we're trying to do that. Plus we have our new software program. We're inventorying our units and getting everything into that software program, and that's starting to tell us when we need to do things as well.
Yeah, since you're center stage, and it may be under Dr. Stegall's report with COVID, but I was just wondering, what are our expectations for cleaning for the new year? Are you gonna cover that? No. Okay.
Well, our standards are not going to change. We're going to maintain the same cleaning standards that we have for our back to school program. I just read it today, and and we're not changing anything in our stance. We're going to keep the same cleaning standards with SSC, who's doing our cleaning in the buildings, even though I think some of it has actually laxed coming from the state, but we're going to maintain those standards because it's really not costing us anything more to maintain those standards. We're still wearing masks on the bus and buses, drivers, kids, things like that. And we still have our we own these electrostatic sprayers, so they're still available for us to use on a weekly basis at the school. So we're going to continue to use them. If we don't have a COVID issue, maybe it's going to help with the flu or cold issue. Just by maintaining these standards.
And if I can just clarify, we have not, Chris mentioned something about mask on bus. This is really for the good of the public. We have not determined, we have not finalized, mask policy.
And Dr. Stegall is going to cover that.
So.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on her.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just didn't want to.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
We have third-party custodians and building managers in most of the schools, correct?
25 to 27, yes, sir.
Okay. When we develop the contract with them, do we ever review it to make sure, that if we need to make adjustments in terms of the amount of time that these units are on and, the routine for cleaning classrooms and restrooms and cafeterias and common areas, is that negotiated or is it reviewed annually?
We coordinate with them monthly on what they're doing and how we keep the building operating for the services that they're providing.
Because your needs are going to change once you start getting a lot of folks.
Sure, we're running it a lot this summer, just for instance because of all the floors they're doing. So they need to have that air running while they're doing floors and things like that during the summer. So. right now, I'll say we have a great communication with SSC, good and bad. But we have a great communication with them on a monthly, weekly basis if necessary. And things seem to be going pretty well right now.
Are they having the same hiring problem as everyone else?
Absolutely are.
That's what I thought.
It's a struggle.
Any other questions for Chris?
Thank
Your
you.
time's up.
Yeah, all right.
So we're gonna move.
Jim
from
will be
Chris-
happy.
We're gonna move from Chris to Chrissy, and we're gonna get some tech updates on some technical edits to social study SOLs.
Yes.
Exciting!
That's right.
Thank you for putting this together for us.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll just dive right in. So to give everyone a little context, the social studies standards are reviewed every 7 years. That's just a matter of course. That's true of all of the disciplines that have standards that come out of the VDOE. Right now, we're currently in the process of standards review for social studies. It's scheduled to finish up at the end of 2022. These technical edits that we're talking about today were added to the SOL standards in December of 2020, so kind of midstream in this process. And these edits were the results of the work of the Commission on African American History. The commission was created on August 24th, 2019. It was comprised of professors, historians, advocates, school board members, faith leaders, and K-12 educators, so a pretty broad group of people. Feedback from the community was solicited through public comment. There was actually a public comment session here in Roanoke back in February. Final recommendations from the commission were presented to the governor on August 31st, 2020, so it took the commission about a year to do their work. And the Board of Education approved these particular edits on October 15th of 2020. So the commission had 4 main recommendations that were approved by the board. The first was these technical edits that we're talking about today. And again, they were approved in October of 2020 and added to the standards in December. Another recommendation that was approved by the board was some changes were made to the standards review process for social studies. And those changes that were made were to bring in more people and perspectives. They increased the number of times that outreach was held and a couple of other things. But this is, again, currently in process. We're in the standards review process right now. The commission also recommended that a cultural competency requirement for licensure was added. This is something that's being worked out at the state level. So the state is coming out with their recommendations and guidance for divisions. We haven't seen any of that yet. We don't have any idea how any of that's going to look at this point. The state has told us that their recommendations, their guidance, should be out by the end of this calendar year, and that that requirement should be in place for the 2022-2023 school year. And the final recommendation that was approved was to require African American history professional development for all history and social science license holders. Again, we don't have any specifics on that at this point. That's all being worked out at the state level. The assumption is, and because we don't have any information right now, but the assumption is currently for history and social science license holders, we have, for example, a civics module that's completed as part of our professional development. So the assumption is it will be something along the same lines as that. It'll be PD that comes, again, from the state. It'll be created by the state and disseminated by the state. So the intent of these technical edits was to ensure that content in Virginia schools, and specifically social studies content, is accurate, inclusive, and relatable, and to teach a full and comprehensive history. All of the edits can be found on the VDOE website. I put the link in there for everyone to have easy access to it, so you can read the entirety of the standards, edits included. And implementation on the state level, the History and Social Science Department, again, made those edits in the standards. They officially revised those, and they came out in December of 2020. So if you go to that link on the previous slide and you look at the standards document, it'll have a little tag on it that says it was revised in December of 2020. We were given guidance at the division level to incorporate these edits to the extent which we were prepared during this past school year. And we as a division, much like most of the divisions across the Commonwealth, didn't do a whole lot with these edits last year simply because, well, two main reasons. It was a mid-year edition. It was happening in December. And it's kind of hard to change things a little bit midstream. And COVID-19, as we all know, that kind of threw things, into a little bit of upheaval. So there were lots of changes that were going on, lots of things that our teachers were having to adjust to. Just by the nature of things, so we didn't kind of want to add one more thing on the teachers' plates last year. The state, however, is expecting full implementation of these edits during this next school year. Yeah.
And maybe you're going to this, Dr. Nicely, or however this, are we implementing these technical edits? We're implementing the full time. Okay.
Yeah, these are part of the social studies standards. It's what we're required to teach, just like we're required to teach the math standards and the science standards and stuff like that.
Okay, so we went through that pretty quick.
That was an excellent summary. And I think the thing that you mentioned is that all standards, not just social studies, math, science, and English as well, go through a 7-year cycle. And this update was done in the middle as a result of General Assembly action, to the Board of Education. And those items that were placed in there as updates will be reviewed like everything else when they start this next cycle. And it's important also to understand that they are really, really trying to be more inclusive. And unfortunately, they plan right now to have, I think, 5 public hearings throughout the state when they get to the point where they're close to a draft or a final draft. There are 8 superintendent's divisions in the state, if I'm correct, Mr. Nicely, Dr. Nicely, which means that we may or may not. Roanoke is probably large enough that we should have one either in or close by, but I would recommend, very much that if our teachers want to participate in those, that they be advised, and if we have parents or anyone else who would like to make comments, because that's part of it too, and they certainly have that opportunity to make those comments. Understanding that this whole process is driven by the General Assembly and the State Board of Education. We have input, but we don't create the standards. We try to do the best we can with implementing the standards, but we don't create the standards. So it's imperative that as we go forward, we keep our teachers and public advised, as to when these opportunities for involvement are, so that they will feel like they have an opportunity to influence those standards.
So here on the division level, this summer, we've had several teachers who have worked to develop additional resources to help teachers implement and teach these edits, because some of these edits have some new information that hasn't previously been in the SOLs. Some of them have some things that are have changed or have just had a lot more specificity added to them. So we've had some teachers who have created or curated some online resources. So they found things like articles that give teachers some background knowledge, websites, created lesson plans from things like the Library of Congress, the National Archives, and these teachers have also created some original content. So again, things like lesson plans, PowerPoints, project ideas that teachers can use with their students. And these resources will be added to our curriculum guides. Training will be provided for teachers of Virginia Studies, U.S. History 1, U.S. History 2, and Virginia U.S. History at 11th grade. That's where the bulk of these edits take place. Trainings will be held at each elementary school for the Virginia Studies teachers, and the secondary teachers, so U.S. History 1, U.S. History 2, and Virginia U.S. History, will be trained as part of our Content Professional Development Day in August. And so the training will include looking over the edits. A lot of our teachers haven't had time to kind of delve into these, again, because of kind of the upheaval of last year. We'll also, through this training, look over the resources that have been created and curated, and will also collaborate on questions, concerns, and further needs that the teachers have for implementing these new standards that the state has passed down. Teachers have been provided expectations on professionalism and dealing with sensitive topics in a respectful environment. That's actually nothing new for us. As social studies educators, we're used to dealing with sensitive topics. So that's kind of, again, this is kind of a matter of course for us, is dealing with professionalism and how to deal with these sensitive topics in the classroom. So this is something that as a department, as a discipline, we talk about on a fairly regular basis.
Question. While you're talking about that, is if a teacher, educator wants to bring something in addition to what is provided for the resources, is it reviewed by staff? Is it something that they'll look at, or they find out after the fact that somebody brought something in that maybe wasn't reviewed?
We don't have any process to review every single resource the teachers bring into the classroom. No, we do have, our curriculum guide includes resources that have been approved from the division level, but teachers, as a matter of course, just bring in newspaper articles when they're talking about current events, or they bring in other websites and things like that. And no, there's no process at the division level to review all of those individual things.
We do, however, the school board has policies, it's called supplemental resources, and so this covers all the content areas, science, math, English. So there are standards, set by those policies that would affect all teachers in our division to say, if you are using supplemental resources over and above, what the, adopted curricula are, these resources that have been vetted, you have a responsibility to make sure that you vetted those properly and so forth. So you as a school board have a policy, regarding the use of those.
Are these trainings normal? Does this happen every few years when curriculum changes?
So after we go through the standards review process, so every 7 years, and this will be, after we go through it this first time, this will be the first time I go through it in my role, but yes, when we have a standards revision, we do, as a matter of course, in our discipline. I can't speak for the other disciplines, but we do look through the changes that are made. We talk about different ways that those changes can be implemented, different resources. Yes, so this is kind of a matter of course type thing. So as far as follow-up goes, I'll continue to follow up with teachers throughout the year. The follow-ups will be both at the department level. I'll send out some emails and surveys to get some information back from the teachers, as well as I'll individually check in with teachers as well. And our teachers will certainly support each other and collaborate as they implement and teach these edits. And then to kind of go back and circle back and take a little bit of a bird's eye view of this, again, we are in this standards review process. As Mr. Weimer mentioned, this work is it's going on right now. So the committees at the state level are currently working on standards revision. This is a long process. So they started back in January, and again, they're not expected to finish up until the end of next calendar year. So it's a pretty lengthy process. There will be public hearings that are held in July and August of 2022. Dates and locations have not yet been announced, but again, as Mr. Weimer mentioned, we will likely have one somewhere in our area, if not in Roanoke, close by, because they do make an attempt from the Commonwealth to make sure they're spread out in the different areas. And the final review of the standards will be presented to the Board of Education in November of 2022. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anything, questions for Missy or Dr. Nicely on this matter?
I'll just add, thank you for that presentation. I mean, so I think what we're hearing is, one, there's already been some sort of midstream changes as she was explaining, but there's also, as they go through this normal process, all these things could change again, and that's an opportunity not only for educators, but also members of the general public to become engaged and voice their input, and so we certainly encourage that to happen.
So, and on do we have it, and forgive me, it would have been easy for me to check this beforehand, but do we have a link on our website for each grade's SOL's requirement from the state? Do we have a link provided for our parents on there?
Yeah, so it's there, and yes, on our website, and it goes directly to VDOE. Okay. And you can buy each, for kindergarten, first grade, second grade.
I thought so, but I
yes, you have about the SOLs, the curriculum that goes along with that in terms of the blueprints. All of that's laid out for you.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Absolutely.
So,
One more question going back to, and you may not know this because it says in place for the 22-23 school year, add a cultural competency requirement for licensure. What exactly does that mean, specifics being worked out? I mean, maybe you can't tell me, but.
I'll speak to it broadly. So, because as just like Maloney was explaining, some of that's still trying to be explained to us from the state. But the way it's defined is simply wherever you are, wherever you teach, you should know who your students are, right? You should know who they are, their background, and so forth. And part of that competency is making sure you're relating to them and building those relationships with them. So if you're in in an urban setting someplace, that might affect, how you approach some different topics. If you're in a rural setting, you should know who your students are. If you have a large Hispanic population, where you are. If you're up in like Winchester or something, it all comes down to that. We have an obligation as educators to know our students, which is, that part's pretty common sense. The rest of it, in terms of how things are interpreted, as she's explained, we're waiting to hear.
And I'm just gonna expand on that, you guys, all right, if I read that statement, this
Yeah,
statement?
good. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is a good time for you guys. So I'll expand on that because, there's obviously been some, a couple of hot button issues in the news, the last couple of, months. So, and forgive me, I'm just gonna read a written statement here and, eventually Chuck will have this up on our website as well. But over the past several weeks, citizens and parents in Roanoke County and across Virginia have expressed concern about news they are hearing at the state level, state and national level, related to public schools. So as members of the Roanoke County School Board, we want to collectively assure the citizens of Roanoke County that our schools continue to be committed to being welcoming and safe places where all students and staff are valued and respected. We embrace equity of opportunity for all students and staff as we work hard together to advance and support student learning and be the best that we can be as a community. To be clear, critical race theory is not included in the curriculum for Roanoke County Public Schools and is not included in current state standards of learning. History and social studies must be studied honestly, accurately, but students are not judged by the color of their skin under any circumstances. We must be accountable for all of our actions as individuals, correct wrongs where they exist, and work together united rather than divided for the good of the community. Likewise, Roanoke County Public Schools has not changed its policies regarding transgender students. We do not discriminate in our schools and will continue to work with students needing support on an individual basis and respect their privacy in an environment that is safe and respectful of all students. Having worked through the incredible challenging past year of the pandemic, our schools and community are stronger than ever, and there's nothing we cannot face working together. We value all of our students and families and look forward to having everyone back for the coming school year. So I hope that statement will clarify for a lot of our citizens some of the angst and some of the things going around. Other boards across Virginia, social media, and in the news. So thank you for giving me the time to say that, and let's jump right into a COVID update. Thank you, Dr. Stegall.
Good evening. I have Charlene Bale here with me. She's our our coordinator of student services, health services, and she helps with our nurses, and she's here to help answer any questions you might have that are more nurse related. First of all, I want to say thank you for your approval for the title change. I can't imagine a better school division to work for and better people in this room or in our division. I feel very blessed to be here, and thank you for allowing me to continue this great work because it's a great place to be. All right. So COVID, we're going to start with current COVID update with numbers. And Chuck, can you open up that website so we can just take a look? It's been a while since we've looked at this website. Last time we looked at it, it probably wasn't a very favorable view of the numbers. It looks much better now. So the CDC came out with some new guidance, and so in that guidance, one of the 4 criteria they ask us to look at, of course, is community data. So that's the first thing we're going to do here is just take a look to see where we're at as a community. Just go all the way down to the bottom chart, and then put in Roanoke. Keep going, right there. Yeah, that one, right, go up a little bit, where you put in the locality, keep going, right up top,
Changed it.
right there,
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they changed the look of it just a little bit.
yeah. Okay, so you'll see here that it looks a little different, but you notice there's 4 categories there. There's low, moderate, substantial, and high. We are in the moderate, and we've been fairly steady in the moderate for a little bit, had one little jump up there. But we are at moderate, which is a good place to be. We're also, if you scroll down just a little bit, Chuck, it will show you that our percent of positivity for testing is at 4.1%, which again, you can see there it's in the low range, which is a good look. And if you keep going down a little bit farther, these are the numbers that we kept looking at last year. You'll see we're in the low range. Hospitalization is at the moderate, but and then but the main indicator that we're going to use as a determination of where we're at as a school division is that first one, and that's where we're sitting with moderate. So just wanted you to take a look at that. We can go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So Roanoke County vaccination, that's the second category they want us to take a look at, and we are at 68.1 in Roanoke County for adult vaccinations, which is a good number. These are the percentages of at least 1 dose, and 41.3% for children 10 through 19. That I think that number is pretty good. If you recall, we did several vaccination clinics. We did first dose and second dose at several locations across the division, encouraging kids to get their vaccinations. So as we start school, we're starting school with a very different perspective. Remember last year when we ended school, we had masks, we had very few people had been vaccinated, we had very high population of transmission or of positive tests. So we're coming in with a very different look and a lot of different variables in our picture. So the health department recommendation, most likely, they're going to match with the CDC. They have not come out with their recommendations yet. We were on a phone call today, and we're supposed to be getting those soon, but CDC put out their information. It usually takes a little bit for health department to catch up.
Excuse me, is the vaccination available for 10-year-olds? I thought it was 12.
It's 12.
So then why are our statistics showing 10 through 19?
Department of Health does it, so that's the
Mhm.
statistics they give.
Because that's obviously going to bring that number
Yeah.
down.
I don't know why it had
It's
10.
not including younger than 10 either.
I don't know if it was a typo on their part, but I took it right off of their spreadsheet today.
Yeah, you're right, that'll bring it down.
That's going to make it not look
Makes
as...
it look
Because
like
it also
direct.
goes to 19 years old too, and those kids are out of high school by then.
Yeah.
But that's how they break it down.
Yeah, if I could just add, I mean, we had our, we still have our regular calls with Dr. Morrow, not on a weekly basis, but they're still regular. We had that today, and she actually called, complimented, I mean, it's not our doing as a school system, but in Roanoke County, the adult vaccination rates are probably the highest in our region, which is a good thing. In terms of our ability to make, decisions, and then, as far as the adolescent population, that number you saw, even if it is lower, is not atypical. The vaccination rate for those under 18, typically has been a lot lower than the adult population. I was just throwing that in for
That's
information.
Thank
Okay, what do we know now to start the 21-22 school year? The first thing we know that is a given is CDC has a federal order that currently exists, and we have no indication that that's going away, that on school buses and public and private schools are not exempt from this, that we are mandated for everyone to wear masks. That's all students, all bus drivers, and all aides. So every person who is on public transportation, including school buses, are required to wear a mask. And that is an order, that's not a recommendation. So currently, that's the one order that we do have in place, and that's one that I'm assuming since it's an order, we would be expected to follow that one. The second one, CDC recommends 3 feet of physical distancing. So remember last year, we had lots of conversations about 6 feet, then we went to 3 feet. CDC mentioned that would be okay to consider that. Now they are resting that 3 feet is okay. However, this time what we see that's a little bit different, they say that they recommend 3 feet, but not at the expense of not bringing all kids back into the classroom setting. So really what they're saying is you can go under 3 feet if that means you need to get all the kids into the building. So you can see a little bit of the easing of their language as we return. The next one is we're still waiting on guidance for the health department and the VDOE. The health department on the call today, she did say most likely they are matching up with CDC, which means CDC is not making any mandates, neither would the health department. So right now we're not expecting any mask mandates from the governor, from the CDC, or from the health department. So that would be except for transportation, right? Yes. So we may need, just to put this out there, we did have some conversations about the Delta variant, and that there is some concern about that potentially coming back as we all get back indoors. And considering the fact that our younger children are not vaccinated. So they just want us to be prepared and be upfront with people that, yes, if we choose to start school without masks, if our numbers start to spread, we start to have problems in individual schools, or even as a division, we might have to go back and think about preventative strategies such as going back to mask wearing. So we just want to put that out there that, everything has changed. We're hoping that won't happen. We've got great vaccination rates. We're hoping that we've had such a hard time with COVID. We want to be on the downhill of this, but we just need to be aware that that is lingering out there, and the health department is concerned about it.
The other thing we need to know is because of the mask policy for the buses, we are going to have massive lines at each school, just like we've had last year. So
You mean private transportation?
absolutely. So that's going to be a huge issue going forward.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So from the staff position, here we are not recommending adding any additional mandatory requirements outside of any mandated requirements that may come down from the health department, the CDC, or the governor's executive orders. Currently, we are not expecting that to happen from what we're hearing, but right now we are currently under a state health commissioner order that through the end of July that basically says all students in school buildings must wear masks. So that's the reason in summer school we still have kids wearing masks, is because we're currently under the health commissioner order. But that runs out July 25th. If it's not amended, it expires, then it goes away. So once that one goes away at the end of July, if it's not amended, the only order that we have is mask on public transportation. Okay, here's what the CDC guidance that just came out July 9th. This is just a quick rundown of what it says. The priority of the CDC is to get all kids back into classrooms, and it even goes as far to say even if the prevention strategies cannot be implemented, meaning wearing of masks, distancing, some of those hard, fast rules that we had at first. So they're giving schools options. They want kids in and giving you a little bit more flexibility. They want us to continue to monitor. The first one is community transmission. That's what we just looked at, the community data. We've been doing that since day one. They want us to take a look at the vaccination coverage, which we just did. We think our vaccination rates are very high, very good for Roanoke. Roanoke County is the highest in our health district. So I think we're in a better place. So we have less vulnerable people because they've had an opportunity to get vaccinated. So originally that's what our big concern was, is our students getting in, going back and transmitting it to the vulnerable population. Those people have had an opportunity to get vaccinated. So we do have a little bit different picture. There's something new they're introducing called screening testing. We're going to talk about that just a little bit more detail in just a minute. and then occurrences of outbreaks. Well, we've always tracked outbreaks, right? Because we always send the information out of the number of positive cases, how many quarantines. We've done that since day one. So those are the 4 things that the CDC recommends that school divisions keep an eye on as they make their decisions on what kind of mitigation strategies or prevention strategies to put in place. They recommend, the CDC does recommend that masks be worn indoors by all individuals 2 and older who are not fully vaccinated. They also recommend that at least 3 feet of physical distancing to the extent possible, but again, not at the expense of not accommodating all students in classroom setting. And then they do recommend that we continue to have our layered prevention strategies. We already have those in place. We've done all these things. We're currently working on adjusting our health plan. We were working with Chris Lowe. So when we talk about our screening, we'll talk about that's what the screening, this screening means, the health screening. So when we ask our staff and our students to do the health screening of the symptoms prior to coming to work and to school, that's what this means. So we will continue to send that messaging. The most important thing with this is if you're feeling symptoms, you still should not come to school and you still should not come to work. So we still need to message that the best we can. Ventilation, we've talked a little bit about that. We continue to need to focus on good ventilation in the classrooms. Different things that Chris talked about, but also open windows on buses, fans in the classroom, those kinds of things. Continuing to ensure hand washing throughout the day, staying home when sick, contact tracing and quarantine protocols, which our nurses did a phenomenal job managing that. And then, of course, cleaning and disinfecting. So we have no plans of walking back any of that. So except for there's one thing in the cleaning we are going to pull back on, and we had our secondary students washing their own desk in between each single class. CDC's new guidance says you only need to clean once a day. So they're not finding that the transmission on surfaces are to the level that we need to be concerned with more than cleaning surfaces 1 time a day. So we're backing away from that cleaning.
Do I understand the third one, the recommended mask be worn indoors by all 2 and older, being all children are wearing them that aren't vaccinated?
Yes.
That's what the CDC recommended.
Right.
Okay, so that's not our recommendation.
That's right.
No,
Okay.
that's their recommendation.
Okay.
And nor are they mandating it, nor do we think the state's gonna mandate it, but that is still their recommendation from
Okay.
CDC.
Yeah. So we're not backing down on most of that. So we're still going to keep those mitigation strategies in place.
You know, on contact tracing,
Yes,
you still, if you have a case, you're still gonna go through the protocols.
we are. Yes.
Is that correct?
There's-
You're gonna cover
we
that,
have
I
some
think.
details on
Oh,
that
okay.
too. Yes. Screen testing. So this is something new. So there's opportunities that companies will help assist school divisions, and they will provide testing, different types of testing. There's just different ways of doing this. So basically what this means is if you have infected individuals in the school and they're not exhibiting symptoms. So what this does, it's kind of like a pool sample to try to catch these people who may be positive but not showing symptoms, to try to get them out and quarantined so we're not transmitting. So there's the idea behind this is also to do sporting activities. The kids are in sports, band, different extracurricular activities who have close contact with each other, and do random testing in those groups. The whole idea behind this, according to the CDC, is to keep kids in school, keep kids in their sports, and keep them in activities.
If I might ask, is that something that an outside group is gonna do, or we as a school division are gonna do?
So, an outside group would come in and assist, but it is going to take our
It's
nurses.
our responsibility to do it, but we're gonna farm that out.
Yes,
Well, if we were to do it.
if we were to do it, yes.
Okay.
So here's a couple things about this that get a little bit complicated. Is that it's only for non-vaccinated students and staff. So now we don't ask people whether they're vaccinated or not. We don't have a ready list of who's vaccinated or who's not. So really what this would look like, I'll give you a picture of what a pool testing would look like. So we would decide, okay, we're going to do a random pool test on 9th graders. We would select 10 9th graders, let's say. And so the nurse would then have to pull these random 10 names. So they would have to go into the vaccination website, the health department vaccination site. They'd have to look up every kid. They would have to eliminate the ones who are vaccinated and keep adding random kids until they get their 10 who are unvaccinated. Then they're going to have to get parent permission from those 10 to test. So once they get permission back from those parents to test, then they swab all 10 kids, put the same 10 swabs in one unit. That one unit goes away and is tested. If the test comes back positive, that means one of those 10 kids are positive, but we have no idea which of the 10.
At least one, it could be more.
It could be more. So then what we have to do is the nurse has to contact all 10 of those kids in that group and tell the parents you need to go send your kids for testing. We wait the 24-hour period normally to get the test results back. Then they determine which one's positive, and then we start the contact tracing for that one kid throughout the school day to determine now who else needs to be quarantined.
And there's somebody up there sitting there thinking this stuff up.
That makes my head hurt.
This
Are you
is the
kidding me?
state, the state has
Oh,
this.
my Lord.
So,
Is that why we can just jump to the
Jump to the last
yeah,
bullet.
let's
The
just jump
last
to the
one
last
says, at
one.
this time, staff does
Yeah,
not recommend.
exactly.
Move on.
Yeah,
That's-
we're not recommending that one.
We just wanted you all to know that option was out there, but
Yes.
just for full
Yes.
disclosure,
No,
but that's
thank
not
you.
Well, I'm
something that
glad
we're
we're paying
recommending.
those folks to come up with that stuff.
Yeah. In all seriousness, I mean, a lot of your universities did exactly that kind of stuff all year.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, quarantine. A little bit has changed here. Currently, the health department still has the same rule we've been following for contact tracing. 6 feet, anyone who's within 6 feet for more than a cumulative number of 15 minutes over a 24-hour period of time. So we're still following that. That has not changed. However, keep in mind that if we're not having any physical distancing in the school, you remember that used to be with mask or without mask. It didn't matter, right? So how does that impact our schools? So if we have a positive kid in a classroom without physical distancing, no distancing, we're not meeting the 3 or the 6, all students within 6 feet of that student, with or without mask, it doesn't matter, would be considered a contact. The students who are vaccinated will not be quarantined. The students who are not vaccinated will be quarantined. So that's one difference about the vaccinated students. Even if they come in contact with a positive student, and as long as they're not showing symptoms, they will not be required to vaccinate. They come right back to school. Same thing with our staff. Yeah, right, yeah,
So-
required to quarantine.
So if I may, there's been several references of if they've been vaccinated. We can't be the vaccination police.
Right.
So,
The way that's gonna work is the nurses are gonna have to call home and say,
We've had a few incidences this summer with somebody having symptoms and stuff, and
Right.
or was exposed to somebody who was positive. And one of my first questions is, were you vaccinated?
and if we get to that point, are we just taking their word that they're vaccinated, or that's what I mean. It's just a slippery slope, and I just
I've-
don't think that we need to be the.
There is a
the police in
database
this.
with the information in it, and we had checked with legal about that, I think with you, wasn't it? That we can go in and check and make sure.
Mhm. Okay.
That brings up a whole nother issue though, is, I think you just mentioned legal. Is that even something we can do without the parent
We can, the
permission?
nurses can check immunizations on kids too,
Without
that
the
are
permission of
required for
parents.
school.
This isn't
Well-
required for school.
Well, keep in mind, at that point, that's a conversation between the nurse and the parent.
Which is
So-
protected by HIPAA.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Oh, yes,
Alright.
yeah,
That's
we
right.
don't tell anybody.
Right,
Okay, okay,
but
good.
the point is, I thought you said you could go ahead and do that.
Well, we had checked with Catawba.
I don't think you can.
But I think the way you're describing it is,
Unless the parent-
if somebody's identified, who is exposed, you're calling the parent and asking, because otherwise they have to be quarantined, and you're saying, have they been vaccinated? If they say yes, then you could verify it, but that's a conversation you're first having with
Oh,
the
yeah,
parent, is
yes.
that right?
Oh, yeah.
But again,
Makes
there's
sense.
still that HIPAA, if the parent authorizes it. But what if they say, he's vaccinated, and no, you can't look?
then they're quarantined.
And they're
Okay.
quarantined.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the last one, mask or no mask, regardless of whether our kids are wearing masks or not, it will not change the number of kids quarantined. So, because we're still falling under that 6-foot rule for the health department, right? So it doesn't matter, the same number of kids are gonna be quarantined. However, this is one caveat we haven't dealt with yet. If we're not distancing, we're not wearing masks, the one thing we have to consider is that we may see an increase in transmission. We don't know the study, that we haven't seen it, we haven't experienced it, we've never done it, right? So we're hoping that that doesn't happen. That's why we put that caveat in there that if it does happen, keep in mind that it only takes 2 positive cases connected to each other to shut down a classroom. Okay, only 2. So if we were a classroom right here and I tested positive and then Charlene tested positive, and the only way the 2 of us think we could have gotten COVID is by sitting together, this whole classroom would have to be shut down. So we didn't experience a lot of that this past year, thankfully. I do, I think it's because of the distancing, because of the mask wearing, but we just need to know. But we also have a lot of factors in place now. We have a lot of vaccinated people, right? We have less positive cases.
Rhonda, if everybody else in this room was vaccinated, the classroom
Exactly.
would be shut down. Right?
So we're cutting the numbers down.
Gotcha.
We're also thinking, since we have almost 70% of parents vaccinated, maybe our younger kids who aren't vaccinated, they're going to be less likely to, transmit, because hopefully their parents are protected. So what we had a lot of last year is parents getting it from work, bringing it home to the kids, bringing it into the school. So
Is that a mandate or a recommendation?
a recommendation.
Which piece as far as having the,
I'm talking about the one there where she said mask or no mask, not wearing a mask may impact the chance of the virus transmitted to others, then they're gonna be quarantined. That'd be
Yeah.
public health department directive.
Gotcha.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah, that's health department rule for
But again, a
contact tracing.
recommendation, not a requirement.
That would be probably more like the order of a public health order.
That's a requirement. The contact tracing, like once we determine you've been in contact and you have not been vaccinated, you will be quarantined. That's not optional.
That's been that way from the get-go.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
It has. Yeah. All right. So quarantine protocol, this has changed a little bit. At the very end of the year, remember we were doing the 14 days and then we kept talking about the 28 days if you're in the household. That has all changed. At the very end of the school year, CDC came out with some options. There was a 14-day quarantine timeline, there was a 10-day quarantine timeline, and then they got down to 7. The golden standard is the 14 days. That's the safest you can possibly be. However, keeping kids out of school for 14 days or staff out of work for 2 weeks is stressful. So stressful on the families and on the school. So they did give this option of a 7-day quarantine. We did go with this at the end of the year, if you remember, because we wanted to get to finish out the school year and get people back in, especially seniors, getting them to graduation, those kinds of things. So we tried that out and we had pretty good success. I know Salem also reverted to this at the end of their school year as well. So basically what this means is you're out for 7 days of a quarantine. You're to go get tested on the 5th day or after. If you come back with a negative test, you can return after the 7th day. So it cuts it, if you don't have any symptoms. So it cuts it down from 14 or 10 now to 7. But you have to go get tested and it has to be negative. So that's a quicker way to get back into school and get staff back into the building. Of course, again, vaccinated individuals will not be quarantined regardless, but we'll need to watch for symptoms for 14 days. So if we were positive and Ken had been vaccinated, and he would not have to be quarantined, however, we would say to him, you still need to watch for symptoms for 14 days. So just to make sure that it has not been transmitted. Okay, the CDC revised their quarantine and contact tracing. So I think the reason they did that is to help schools get kids back in, okay? So just keep this in mind. I think this is what they're doing here. For unvaccinated children only, this does not apply to staff. If both people, Charlene or I, are both wearing masks, we're elementary kids, could not have been vaccinated. We're both wearing masks throughout the entire time we're sitting together. If we stay 3 feet apart the entire time we're together, they've noticed they've dropped it to 3. It's normally 6. But if we stay 3 feet apart from each other, we both have masks on, and we're children who are unvaccinated, we do not have to be quarantined. So that's how they've adjusted it a little bit to help schools keep more kids in the building. But we're not really going to have to worry about that. That's going to become an issue with our nurses, because we're going to we're hoping that masks will be optional. And so if I have a mask on and she doesn't and Ken doesn't, the nurses are going to have to figure out who was wearing the mask, how far apart were you, how long were you together. They've got to get all that information together to determine who was vaccinated, who wasn't vaccinated, to determine who has to be quarantined. So they're still doing an awful lot of work to figure this out. And now they just threw this one in there that complicates the whole matter just a little bit more.
Doesn't even make sense.
So kind of just for the good of the public, as it stands right now, once July 25th, there's no mask mandate for school children. So mask wearing in Roanoke County, assuming that mandate is not extended, is going to be optional for students and staff, correct? But we do have to follow the CDC guidelines for public transportation, which would require masks, similar to plane and train travel. So, okay.
That's correct. Yep.
All right.
That's it.
And
Well, I think
regarding
that will-
that transportation, we're probably gonna need someone to talk with from the schools to talk with the police department in Benton. Herman L. Horn, it's just a nightmare. I mean, somebody's gonna get killed on Ruddle right there. Because they come around and the line's all the way back down
That's
to
a
Mountain
good
View.
point.
I don't know if there's probably another elementary the same thing, but Herman L. Horn is just a nightmare.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Just one or question. Did you have, now this golden standard is vaccinated.
Mhm.
Did you have anyone approach and say, hey, I had COVID, I have immunity?
The 30 day, didn't they give us like the 90
If
days?
you've had COVID, it's 90 days
Right.
after you've had COVID that you wouldn't have to quarantine again. And I don't think they've changed that at all.
Haven't changed it.
They did accept that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
question. Hopefully we don't get a lot of kids quarantined, okay? Hopefully that's what we're looking for.
Yes.
That's our gold standard.
It is.
But if a child is, quarantined for 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever, are we not still responsible for their instruction?
Oh, absolutely.
So that means that we might be using some of the virtual that we've been doing for the past year for those students on the short-term basis
That's right.
to make sure that they don't fall behind.
That's exactly right.
And, I think back to what we did to teachers back at the beginning of the school year. They go home on Friday and on Monday they're teaching virtually. And all the lesson planning and all of the technical support that they need to be able to do that. Teachers need to be aware that, they're looking at a similar, if not the same scenario, to be able to give those students that instruction in a timely fashion. So
You're exactly right. And then,
don't give up the skill sets we've learned.
that's right. That's right.
To that point, can we, because we absolutely crushed our teachers last year, not just us, but society in general. For a elementary school, so I've got 2 kids in second grade in Miss H's class and 2 kids in Mrs. S's class. Can we have fewer teachers maybe that instead of having to do both, can do one for the whole school? Does that make sense? Am I even making sense? Well, what I'm saying is, currently last year, they were having to teach both. They were doing both. Instead of having them have to do both, and I'm sure y'all thought of this in some fashion, you got a couple out of 4 classes. Couldn't there just be one assigned maybe to 2 or 3 elementary schools that do all the second grade in Herman L. Horn, Cundiff, and Mount Pleasant, that are quarantined or whatever that are doing virtual, only one second grade teacher that handles those kids? I know they wouldn't be the same teacher.
It's a great question. You know, the difference, the game changer here is that you were talking about, you know, incidental outages this time because of quarantining versus the whole year, because we did, you know, last year exactly, you know, a lot of that. And what you just said there at the end, I think is going to be the overriding factor. Because we're talking about a 7-day incidental thing, I mean, it's probably best practice, and Ms. Hogan can correct me from an elementary perspective, but, you know, to stick with that teacher, because otherwise they're going, that they can do that without missing a beat in a very different way than, you know, assigning you to a different teacher and trying to figure out where you are and all that kind of stuff. You know, in the interest of making sure that it's as fluid as possible, you know, for a 7-day period of time, would you think differently that it's going to be best to keep with that teacher?
And because the amount of time that they're going to be out is a little bit shorter, with the quarantine, it's not the 14 days is what I'm hearing. What we would do is we do still have all those lessons that are available on Blackboard where they would be able to access those, and then we've got WebEx where then the teacher wouldn't have to necessarily do it every single day, that we would do a periodic check-in to make sure that with the lessons and instruction that they're receiving, that it's appropriate, it's working for that child.
All I gotta say is God bless the teacher.
You know, the blessing of last year is that we now have archived a lot of instruction. When we started out, we had zip 0. And, you know, but we do now have an archive that teachers can access so that, you know, it's extra steps. I'm not disagreeing with you, Tim. It's extra steps, but you go in at step 3 instead of step 1.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to meet those kids' needs. And I agree with Dr. Nicely. The individual teacher that works with these students know them much, much better than anyone that we would say, you got a 5-day assignment with Dave Weimer, or you got a 7-day assignment with Tim Greenwood. You know, they know where you are, they know what they're doing, they know what their short-term and long-term goals are for you, and they can adjust that. Yeah. Easier than someone else.
Have we set requirements for those that want virtual learning? I mean, or is everybody expected to be back in the classroom?
Oh, yeah, we, that a couple months ago.
Yeah, so for K-8, let me start with high school actually. From a high school perspective, you know, we already had online courses, you know, for you know, the last you know, many years. And so during COVID, of course, we expanded those courses, and that's all asynchronous courses. Those are not tied to a, you know, classroom teacher. So what we did was we expanded all those because of COVID, and because of that, now we have a full complement of classes where a student at the high school level could, in fact, be fully virtual if they choose to, right? And so that was something that, you know, regardless of COVID, you know, a lot of high school kids might choose to do. You know, one of our thoughts was, you know, you might have some homeschoolers out there, for example, who want to take advantage of that, and now they're actually fully students with us, just by way of example. K-8, you know, we really do believe that being in class is the best place, you know, for those students, especially during those developmental years. So that's where we've set the stipulation that in order for you to be fully online, you really do need to provide us with some, you know, medical documentation related to COVID to say there's a reason for that, because with those students, you know, we just really feel strongly that they really need to be in the classroom. So that's been well advertised, you know, so far. You know, I know at the elementary level we've had a handful.
Yes, I've only enrolled 6 students for Virtual Virginia as of this time.
Right. So in Virtual Virginia is going to be the provider for that. That's that state program. So that's not, you know, adding to the burden of our teachers. You know, that has been well advertised, but just to say it out loud for the good of the public, you know, if anybody wants to exercise, you know, that option, they need to let us know really right away, because Virtual Virginia has to have teachers, you know, hired to teach all these students as well. So
Premature question, but I think one we have to worry about budget-wise. Any indication, we've got a lot of dynamics going on other than COVID now, any indication that we lose any students this year, any, I mean, I don't even know how you'd quantify that yet, but, you know, I mean, that's gonna be a budgetary.
Right, it's a great question, an important question, you know, across the state. So we really won't have a full handle on that till, you know, as we get closer to school. You know, when it comes to school enrollments, whoever shows up on day one, that's your enrollment. In fact, you're not absent; you actually show up a day to enroll. So. You know, one thing we can look at, to your point, is how the kindergarten registrations are going, and I don't have that information, but that's one thing we can look at and report back to you as far as how that's going.
I think that's gonna be important as we go forward, but like you said,
Right.
it's probably premature, but
Right.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else for Dr. Scott? All right. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.